Hare Krishna. So I'm so glad to be able to share my story, how I came to Krishna consciousness. I'm actually still trying to come to it. It's a journey, but just to go through a few, I guess, a bit of history and some milestones and landmarks on my journey. And so thank you so much for this opportunity. So I was born actually in Lithuania, which is a communist, used to be a communist country. So my both parents grew up in this situation of godlessness. And there was no at all, no any spiritual background, no religious background at all. Although my grandmother, she is Catholic, but and she couldn't pass it to, my father, and my grandmother from mother's side, she was what is called Protestant. So they couldn't pass it in Soviet Union, although they both had faith. From my mother's side and my father's side, their parents had faith. One was Catholic, another was Protestant. But my parents were born in like 1953, 54. So that was already the Soviet Union, and the whole ideology was kind of in full swing. There's religion is opium for the masses. So they grew up in that kind of environment with completely nothing. The churches were kind of closed and falling apart and etc. So I basically was born into this small village and I grew up where my parents got married, and my first contact with church was in that village actually. The church was falling apart. I used to go to church to play games. You could jump through the window. It was a hole in a window, and you used to kind of run around. And that was all. That was my only contact with religion. Is playing at that church until I was maybe 14, 15 years old. And at that time we moved. By that time we moved to a bigger city, which was about 20,000 people, and I was living still in a village but near that city. So then there was still nothing religious, going through this kind of life, and that was, no concept of God whatsoever. Maybe until I was 14, maybe not 15, 16, 14 years old, when Lithuania by the time became independent from Soviet Union in 1991. So I was 11 at that time, so maybe a few years later after that, it kind of became cool to be religious again, especially in the smaller cities. So my grandmother then had an idea, that I need to become baptized, or whatever you call it, Christianized, baptized, kind of initiated into that tradition of Catholicism. So I went for 1 month to church, and you have to study, the philosophy of Christianity, and then I passed the exam. So interestingly enough, during that month, I was like 14 or something, during that month, that was my first contact with God, so I didn't have any problem with the concept of it. It's just like, I guess in that age you're like naturally accepting, certain concepts. So I wasn't like didn't have like aversion to it at that time. So I even started to pray to Godfather, not like fanatically, but just before the bed, say a small prayer. Can't remember what it was, but just saying a small prayer and then going to bed. So during that training period, there was some acceptance of God for me. But when it was finished, I passed the exam. Because there is this thing in Catholicism where you have to speak about the things that you did. How is it called? Like
Confession.
confession, yeah. Yeah, so I went to confession and I said something like to the priest, I was trying to be honest, So I said something, or quite something open, I don't want to get into the details, but he started to ask me for details of it, like, questioning it, trying to understand what it is. And then, I think I told him a couple of things. But that was that, after that experience, I thought, no, I don't want to confess anymore. Because it was just like too, it just got too uncomfortable and too personal, that kind of thing. I mean, there was nothing, I was like 14, 15 years old, there's nothing in terms I didn't commit any sins, but it's just like the way he was questioning it, trying to churn everything. I thought, no thanks. So interesting that, I don't know, but it was around that time, there's another interesting thing happened. So I had never been again for confession, but around that time, somebody came to our house where I was living in this village. My father opened the door, and that day, for some reason, very kind of stuck in my mind, although it was just an ordinary day, and somebody sold a book to my father, like a big book, and I didn't even see it when it was sold and how it was sold. The only thing that it was heard that somebody came and to the door. My father had an interaction, and then he came in with a book, and he had this, like very strange looks. He was like mixture of embarrassment, kind of shyness, a little bit discomfort, and etc. And from now, what I understand, it was even some sort of purification happened, in him at that specific moment. So actually, he had Bhagavad Gita in his hands. So it was a devotee who came and sold him a book, doing door to door. And then, with this kind of mixture of strange feelings, he put the Bhagavad Gita in our bookshelves. And so this is where I saw it, because before that I just heard that somebody came, there was interaction, and he comes in a room where I was in the room where all the library is, and he had this book in his hands, and he just put it onto the shelf. And it was just like a very simple kind of thing, nothing extraordinary, but this kind of day somehow or another recorded in my mind very deeply. I mean, I now understand why, at least to some extent, it was a Bhagavad Gita. So in this book, then, it was kind of present to some extent in my life. I just knew it existed there, onwards from that time on. It just was there, like, something enters your life, various things, people go through different things, a relative enters your life, or or some friend, and becomes like present. So this book became somehow another present in my life. There, I remember picking it up, once or twice, kind of putting out a shelf and kind of flicking a little bit. And the only thing that I remember is just reading words, transcendental. That's all, and that was like far above my head, and I just put it back. But it was there, it was really, really there. And then another small encounter with religion was like maybe a couple of years later, when I was 16. One of my classmates was very devout Christian. She came from another school or something like that, and she just finished, last couple of years of the school. She was a classmate. There was nobody else. There was no idea of religion among anyone in my class, and everybody was more or less kind of atheist, agnostic type of thing. There's not even speech ever, about religion. Never discussed with anyone among friends, with the exception of this lady. And actually, even when she was, I knew that she's devout Christian, even didn't speak with her at that time. But when I then moved to university town, which was 2 hours away from my hometown, and I think she was studying there as well. So 1 year, on that first year, or one day when I was going back by bus back to my hometown, we happened to be in the same bus. So then I asked her some questions and about religion, and she shared her faith, spoke about Jesus and etc. But I would say that I was just like asking those questions just to be polite. I wouldn't say like I had some strong interest, but just like I did it just because it, out of curiosity a little bit and that kind of thing. So that was that. At that point, first year I was like 18, 19 years old at that time. And then university life, for a few years. And interesting in university life, it felt like I must have missed something in my life at school, because at school I was a bit geek, like studying and being, very responsible with my studies. I was quite good, relatively good at my studies. I was kind of more or less best in my class. All the subjects, most of the subjects. So when I went to big town university in big town, I felt I must have missed something in my life. I felt I need to catch up. So I got into, clubbing and pubbing and nightclubs and that kind of stuff. Like going for it, trying to what I thought, catching up. Got into this interesting company who weren't really into studying, but somehow or another I managed still do relatively well at the university. But at the same time I was just like driving my body, and my life like high speed, just going for it. So like picking up some bad habits and stuff like that. So anyway, in the last year of university then, I came to the point that I really got fed up with this kind of lifestyle, although I was trying to be happy and kind of trying to fit in. But obviously, you can fit into many groups, but somehow karmically, I was wanted to fit in with the people who were like a bit of kind of rock and roll and cool, and not necessarily those who were like a studious or like a very responsible or serious about life, but those who were like a party animals. But to some extent become a bit of party animal. So I just wanted to fit in with this kind of type of people for whatever reason, karmically. And they just got fed up with it. Just got really fed up. And you couldn't admit for a while that this is not me. I wasn't happy really doing that. But, because of, you wanted to explore it, you want to experience it. I just was going along with it. But deep inside of me, I just wasn't happy with it. It wasn't so obvious to begin with, because when you're suffering and you're not happy, you're not like fully aware of it neither. So then at one point, I just got really fed up with it, and I started to some extent admit it that I'm not happy, but I didn't realize, I didn't have an idea whether is there anything to do about it, because it's just like, it seems that everybody seems to be okay, and just like, there is no concept, I don't know, maybe it's more nowadays that people speak about this, but there was no concept in the culture that I grew up, to speak that you're going through some difficult time, and there was no concept of doing that. So somehow or another I just was going through this tough time, being fed up with my company that I was keeping, and etc. So I decided I really want to move away from it, like developed intense desire for a change and transformation. Wanting, and also actually an interesting moment was when I, around second or third year, actually both second and third year of my university, I went abroad to United States. And that's an interesting thing, just to tracing it back a little bit. Going to this different culture.
Boston, where were you?
Yeah, I went first year to Chicago and second year Boston. So that was interesting as well, step towards my spiritual journey, although there was absolutely nothing spiritual there, but just the sense of the freedom that you get, like you realize that you grew up in your Lithuania, is first in a small town and then in a bigger town and then going to the United States. It gave me some understanding how we become conditioned with our cultural upbringing, of the being Lithuanian or being from this specific small town and etc. And then broadening your horizons of being in the United States. So it's kind of, to some extent it was challenging, but also there was a taste of the kind of liberating yourself from those constraints, cultural constraints, and upbringing and etc. I had a taste for it, it's kind of awakened something in me that I would like, to become further liberated, from those limitations of what people put on themselves, of upbringing and culture and etc. I just really wanted to, I really enjoyed it. And when I came back to Lithuania, I kind of pursued it further of being free from those constraints. So that was an interesting thing, that I believe also had a certain effect of me embracing a Krishna consciousness as some sort of evolution of, again, removing certain constraints. Although, you may think, Krishna consciousness is something limitation, but for me it was further freeing myself from the things that I am not, and embracing the things that who I am. So I got as well in this space that I actually got a bit depressed in my last year. With this lifestyle that I was leading, I wasn't happy. The way I was living wasn't happy. The friends that I was associating with, I wasn't happy. They're just like very kind of shallow and external, just like more like all about partying, and there was nothing deep there. It was like a very, very external. And also I was wondering, like, I was remembering as well the teenage years, or even before teenage years, because teenage years there is a tendency as well to kind of shift from this kind of innocence of your youth. There's something about it, there's this innocence where, unless you're kind of suffering, very much, but I remember at that time I was very happy, like at 12, 13 years old, 14, there was a certain degree of happiness there that comes from inside of you, just like a natural, I guess there is a certain touch of goodness there, before you get into, puberty and all that kind of stuff that comes with it. So I just remembering the time when you don't have to do anything to be happy. It's just there, it's just like a natural joy that is there in that time. So I was just looking back in that time, and I was wondering where it is gone, why I need now to, do something to be happy, and why there is no naturally coming from me. That was another question I was wondering, what happened, where is this gone, So basically around this time, then I decided I really need to transform my life, start fresh, start from scratch actually. It's very, very strong desire, but whenever I meet my old friends, I will get back into my old ways. So I just decided I have to go abroad, because I got this taste